Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing all right.
Great.
Always nerve-wracking when you try to get the share right so you don't share your whole desktop. All right. Um, all right. Does anybody know if Murtry's going to be on? Should we wait a couple of minutes for him? Look and see if there's an email. Nope. And nope. And then Sridhar's not on. All right. So board meeting was Tuesday. Oh, there's Sridhar. Okay, we'll have Sridhar give a board meeting recap. Anybody have other thought, and then we can continue. We can review and continue to look at the deck that you guys started last Thursday. I reviewed it, and we went over it um, with the board because I thought it was pretty good. The I think the trick is going to be to say, okay, here, what are the gap? What are we missing? What do we go do? I was about to use even more corporate speak, but what are we missing um, from that list? Because we have some work in some of these areas, and how do we figure out how to do the things that are missing? Any other agenda topic? Okay, okay. So, oh, Sridhar disappeared again. Fair enough. All right. Um, So, and then I think we should go over the note you sent a lot on DSC and OPI.
TSC or DPF?
Yeah,
DPF, I mean, sorry.
yeah. I was gonna say DSC.
Sorry. DPF. Man, there's so many acronyms, and the brain connection overlap of those acronyms is all over the place.
Mhm.
And
I asked for a better name. I really did. It's just that when you give it to R&D, that's what they come up with.
uh, hey, nobody has to apologize for any names their corporate structures come up with, because that's reality. We'll leave it at that. We never discuss or apologize names. We only correct if somebody misremembers or flip some letters. All right, yeah, DPF. That's exactly what I meant. So, Lon, I think maybe going over your note and having a discussion about what's reasonable there would be good. Where do you guys want to start? You want to start with the DPF stuff or the deck?
I think we should start with DPF and then we'll try to connect it back to what's in the deck
Okay.
to see how the two overlap and relate to each other.
Yeah, and if Sridhar comes back, we'll get him to give the board update summary, but leaving out the juicy bits, since those are closed board meeting things. Okay.
Although you just let us know there are juicy bits.
So I can neither confirm nor deny that, as they say. But no, it's just a closed meeting, and there's sometimes budget stuff and whatnot that gets discussed, and
Okay, Sridhar is back. Hopefully he can hear us.
that. Hey, Sridhar, you made it back.
Hey, yeah, sorry, I'm sorry. Some issue, the system rebooted. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it happens. Yeah, I mean, I get acronyms wrong. People's systems reboot in the middle of meetings. It's just the way of the world these days. Okay, so Sridhar, give us a recap of the board meeting, but like as I was just telling people, leaving out any board private juicy bits, as always.
Oh,
Not that there are any, but if there are any, leave those out.
no, no. This time there weren't much of those contents were there. Unfortunately, I didn't. There were a good amount of discussion. I think Joe started explaining that he presented the slides that we discussed in the last week TSC call that Tim presented, and there were quite some feedback and some interesting feedback around that. Unfortunately, I couldn't find time to summarize them and bring it to the TSC call. I was planning to do that. Is it okay if I walk through those things in the next meeting?
We can do that next week.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. I was
No.
trying to complete it.
Anything else you want to highlight from the board meeting? We can do that next week. Also, the meeting on Thursday the 20th, we should probably just cancel, because that's GTC, and I think many of us will be at GTC. And that's NVIDIA GTC. I think Thursday the 20th should be canceled.
27th. Okay.
No, sorry, March
20th, yeah.
March 20th.
Oh, March 20th. Okay. How about the first week of March? Is anybody in the Mobile World Congress? No.
I don't think we have enough people in Mobile World Congress to cancel.
Okay. And another thing that we discussed on the possibility of a face-to-face meeting to discuss the strategy of the governing board members, that there is no decision yet. So we explored that OCP regional, but I think very, very few people are attending, maybe 2 or 3. We may not have the full quorum to have a face-to-face governing board meeting. And apart from that, there is mostly around the TSC updates. I think the position the chair from the life cycle and provisioning, and this DPF thing that which are in the early phases kind of a thing. So I'll be in a better position to summarize those points that were shared by the governing board members and bring it to the TSC call next week. I'm sorry again. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we'll review that next week.
Yeah.
All right. So Alad, maybe you want to share the little note you sent, and let's discuss it.
Well, I'm on my phone, so if somebody else can share it on Slack, please do. But it's very straightforward, Joe.
Oh, then
What
just
I-
explain. We'll go that way.
Well, what I said in the note was very, very simple. It's now the DPF is out and the components are out there for everyone to see. Do we think that other vendors will adopt it? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, then great. I think we have a tool that we can all lean on, so to speak, to build something at OPI, which is somewhat of a process, like we always discussed, how to bring on new vendors, how to bring on new ISVs, and how to provision it, organize it, and orchestrate it. So I just see it as a very well-aligned idea to what we've been discussing for a while. And with a specific focus. For now, it's host trusted, meaning it's more enterprise, IT and cloud, telco, banks, and so on. And we can start that process now. If the others do not see DPF as something they want to adopt, then nothing changes, and we are at the same loop that OPI is today, meaning that we're still on a best effort type of basis, and every vendor has their own thing going to some extent.
Yeah.
So-
Okay. So, yeah, okay. First of all, finish. I apologize. Second of all, let's see if anybody has any comments, questions, or thoughts. Because I have 2 or 3 questions, but mine are of a different nature than mine are likely of a different nature. But go ahead and finish your thoughts, and then we'll go through each person and get feedback, a little bit of feedback to what you said, or clarification, or where they want amplification. And then I have a couple of ideas on how we might move this forward.
Look, Joe, it's really just what I said. I mean, I am now a part of a much larger machine than I was in my previous role, and that larger machine is going to Kubernetes. It's going to treating everything as a cluster, whether it's a GPU, a CPU, or a DPU. Flexibility of moving these containers around is key, and setting up services that are in line with that idea of a grid will become prevalent. So that's why I'm suggesting everybody to join us. That's what I would like to see, and if the answer is no, then that's okay. But that's really my focus right now.
Questions from people or places where you want clarification?
So I have a question about, so it's the host trusted portion of this. Is it because you need to run the operator on the host
Correct.
to provision the DPU IPU?
Yes. At this stage, the first release, it might change in the future, but in this first release, what we're saying is the OS is running on the host. It recognizes the blue field in this case, or the IPU, DPU, as a cluster, and it provisions it, it manages it, it can drop containers into it. So it's basically a worker node for the OS.
Okay, so and it joins the same cluster as the host.
That is the intent, yes. Although I have seen different ways to implement it, that is the main idea.
And so each host is its own, each host and IPU are their own cluster? Or so I'm is the host a master node and the IPU DPU is a worker, or is
Yes.
it the host joins some Kubernetes cluster, multiple hosts
Well,
join it?
actually, both are options. It depends on
Okay.
how you deploy. For Edge, I would imagine it's the first one you said.
Yeah.
For a very dense DC environment, it's probably the latter,
Okay.
because it really depends how you deploy. And again, the idea is to play with these tools so the environment is programmable.
Okay.
Even to the extent the switch is also looking at this as 2 options.
And then I guess a question for the wider group, has anyone yet played with this this tool and tried to make it work yet? I have not. I have not yet had the time to go play with it.
Well, I have not played with it personally, but certainly Red Hat is exercising this.
Okay. Others at Red Hat are exercising it.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not aware of anyone at Intel who's tried it yet,
Okay.
but that's one of the things I need to go do before I can answer anymore.
Right. Totally. Get that. And if I understand it, it is a Kubernetes agnostic, which distro you're using, agnostic operator. Is that a lot? Is that correct? Doesn't matter which Kubernetes distro you're using.
It's
it's not
exactly
tied.
that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We for the first release we used open source.
Okay.
So it really doesn't matter. We've seen since its release, we've seen 4 different Kubernetes, I should say, providers slash users adopt this to their own stack. So I think you'll see more and more of if I'm using Kubernetes, then I have this as an option.
Okay.
Seems like, Paul, there would be some base version capability though, like you have to be modern enough to support the CRDs and other mechanisms DPF
Yes.
is using, so.
Or you can augment them to your own version. Again, the reason why we put the code there is that somebody can look at the code and say, yeah, this part doesn't feel right to me. I'll augment it a little bit so it fits better with what I'm doing. Again, it's the notion we always spoke about at OPI. If there's an abstraction layer hiding the differences in the our Doka or Intel's layer or Marvell's layer, and there's something above it, then everything that comes into that above that abstraction layer looks at the same thing, which is exactly what we try to do here.
Okay. Good.
Anyone else?
So are there 2 components to DPF allowed? There's sort of life cycle provisioning, but then there's this other piece that talks about service management and orchestration. Is that a different operator?
Yeah, it's 2 operators. One is provisioning lifecycle of the device. So if you're equated to OPI, it's sort of our provisioning group. And the other is how you orchestrate and service chain services, which is more like the use case group to a sense, or maybe the POC group to a sense. So yes, there are 2 operators here, and the idea is that not only can you manage the device as a device, and you can change the way you manage it, and it's flexible for a reason, because as we mentioned before, you might want to manage a bunch of them together, or you might want to manage at a later time where these become zero trust. You might want to manage just a bunch of DPUs, IPUs. And the other is the services, and that's what you use to bring on the ISVs, because that is the tool that they would need to understand in order to make sure that their container runs smoothly on it.
Yeah, and that was my point, that the ISVs are going to care mostly about that.
Yeah, indeed.
The orchestration piece, whereas the people installing and managing fleets of cards are going to care more about the first piece. Of course, you need both to create a useful ecosystem.
Yeah, I think you do. Because the first one will, again, it depends on the crowd. The first one is aimed at offering it to people that are either configuring their own cluster, their own cloud, their own infrastructure / other vendors. And the second one is more for the ISVs. So yes, I do believe you need both.
So have people used DPF on top of OpenShift?
Well, I wouldn't say on top of, but I will say that the plan is, as I said, that every distribution that uses Kubernetes will be able to do this. And actually, it's already public that at GTC will be taking the stage with Red Hat NF5. So you can only imagine what that is about.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So Red Hat and NVIDIA working together to and map out how that's going to work together.
I'm just wondering about the breadth of it a lot, whether you've seen interactions with Tanzu, Robin.io, any of these other.
Oh, we've seen
distributions.
plenty of interaction. Obviously, not everybody, but we've seen plenty. As I said, we're now talking to 5 or 6 different Kubernetes distri owners / Kubernetes solution makers that are all working on DPF. We're talking to a few CSPs that are doing this. So again, it's really initial stages now, but I believe that end of year you will see at least these 5, 6 vendors having a solution that includes. And again, I call it includes. It's not on top of. It's sort of another feature.
Yeah, there's an integration with, maybe would be the better word.
That's a great way to put it. Yes, integration with OpenShift, integration with others. Yes, definitely.
I'm eager to hear Joe's comments.
All right, so to incorporate this, okay. I think there's potential value here to incorporate this into OPI for all the reasons Alad said. I mean, Alad articulates them better than I can. To move this forward at OPI, I think what we need is a pull request with here's what you actually do. So Oren and Alad, can you guys have somebody put together a pull request with here's what you actually go do? In other words, whatever APIs need to be submitted, any documentation that needs to be submitted, both either on the architecture side or on the how to integrate side, any code libraries that need to be open sourced that need to be submitted or referenced. You know, if there's so if we're going to cross-reference open source, that's fine, but you need the tie-in so that somebody who goes to OPI can then cross-link to the DPF to make use of it. And then we would want startup, Marvell, NVIDIA, not NVIDIA, sorry, Marvell and Intel to review. So I think I mean, there's a compelling case. The discussion says it's worth looking at. To move it forward, we have to go put something in OPI. And I don't think it's up to other people to put something in OPI. I think it's up to you guys to put something in OPI. Does that make sense?
Well, actually, Joe, I would like to understand the interest first. I think that I don't want to go ahead and explain to other people how to adopt it if they're not even interested in adopting it. That's why in my paper, what I suggested is to gauge the interest. I want them to look at, again, there's a README, there's a GitHub, there's plenty of information there. Enough so every developer we spoke to so far said, I get it, and even some of them just developed.
Okay.
I want them to take a look at it and say if it's even interesting.
Okay. Then, well, all right. So in that case, I think what we need is really what we need is Satyananda and Miles to come back and probably like Josh to come back, and even, you know, you know, Tim to come back and Simon to come back and say, we see how this would fit in. We see how we would use this, with our kit. So our OS or our accelerator apps, or our services apps, or our IPU DPUs. And we think it's worth seeing a formal proposal for incorporation. What are the elements that would get submitted to incorporate? I mean,
Yeah,
and
again, I think that if they can do that, that'll be great, because once we understand who's interested, who's not interested, we can talk to them. We can make sure that that we bring something of value to them, and that they have something to start off with, which is significant. And I think that goes much further than a pull request in my mind.
well, no, so that I disagree with you there. The pull request exactly says that. In other words, it says, and maybe it's a two-level thing where you say, here's the pieces that would be submitted without actually, doing all the work to make the full pull request for the components. But here's the components that that we think should be submitted. Because it's a little hard to judge unless you're asking for, tell us what you want submitted. In which case, if I come back and say, well, I want all of it submitted, that sounds like a good thing to me.
Yeah, that's the mindset, Joe. Exactly. I want them to say, for example, they can come back and say, look, I looked at it. I like the vendor onboarding, but I don't like the provisioning. I have my own way to do. So I'm going to bring out, let's just assume somebody says, I'm going to bring out my own operator that does my provisioning and lifecycle, but I like the way that you onboard ISVs, or I like that portion of it. So that could be something. Again, it's not all or nothing. I just want to make sure that we're not turning people away because they don't want the whole thing, but rather being open about the pieces of it as well.
Thoughts from people? I mean, I understand what you're saying a lot, but thoughts from people. How best to proceed here?
I understand where a lot's coming from with respect to, hey, if no one's interested, why does he want to do the work to bring it into OPI? I also hear what you're saying, Joe. Like, we're looking at, bringing in the code here to provide, that common framework. So yeah, I think it is a valid ask around, hey, what kind of parts do look interesting to the broader public? I'm going to ask some teams here to take a look and see what kind of feedback I can get over the next week, maybe two, and that's what I can commit to.
All right. So Simon and Tim, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think it's very good if we can bring working solutions to OPI. I agree with Elad that it's important that there's buy-in from different parties. And I will certainly do my homework and provide some feedback. Yeah, I guess that's all I have to say at this moment.
Tim?
It seems like we're caught here a little bit, Joe, and that, LAD and NVIDIA are saying, here we have something we think might be useful, take a look at it, see how you want to use it. And you're kind of saying, well, no, NVIDIA should come to us with a proposal on how they want to us to use it and integrate it into OPI. So we're kind of coming at it from different angles. So I think that's causing some of the confusion, right? So, I mean, one way to look at it is to say, well, NVIDIA has a thing, and we see a lot of overlap with what OPI is trying to achieve. And we have to decide, do we want to sort of, with NVIDIA's cooperation, try to co-opt that and pull it into NVIDIA? I mean, sort of pull it into OPI, which is just kind of what you're saying with the pull request. Another view of it would be, well, maybe we're not doing that, at least initially. Maybe what we're saying is OPI is going to try to define for the community how to use DPF alongside whatever else OPI provides. And if nothing else, at least provide a reference to the community on how to get on board of OPI, I mean, on board of DPF. But again, that feels like maybe NVIDIA should be doing that if it's an NVIDIA only solution. So I'm just sort of running open loop here, Joe. So trying to get my mind around the space. And because we sort of are coming at it disjointed from different angles, we're all a little confused, I think. We don't even know who should propose what at this point.
Yeah,
I mean,
that
I propose that somehow we play with this in the lab we have, and someone does. I don't know who, but I propose that someone works at playing with DPF in the lab and seeing what it does, and yeah. And I definitely think that both Intel, Marvell, and the other DPU vendors, Asim from you guys, you can, I don't know if Asim is on, but that, yeah, I would love to see what all of the other vendors think of this approach. Because I know that operators have been used by other card vendors to do work similar to this. I'd love to see what how it compares to the work those vendors have done in the past.
And again, if they come back and say, look, we don't need that, we have our own operators, that's perfectly fine.
Yep.
Then OPI's mission becomes, well, first find the operators belonging to the DPU IPU vendor, then you take an ISV and you do this, which is perfectly fine. But I just need to know.
Yep, totally understand that.
all right. So the okay, so the next step is for DPU vendors and others to take a look at the existing documentation for DPF and have a opinion or an assessment of what would be what might be useful to pull into OPI. And
Joe, can I correct it a little bit? I don't think we want what could be useful for OPI at the first stage. I first want to ask them, is this interesting to you?
yeah, but that
Is it interesting to them? Then we can have the discussion of how we pull in, what do we pull in, and so on.
no, but why are those distinct in your mind?
Because I don't want somebody to say, I like this part right here, but nothing else. Taking like 2 rows of code or one piece of the operator and saying, I like this thing. Everything else I do not like. Then it's not really something that we're focused on, right? It's breaking it apart to pieces and picking at the pieces and saying, I like that. No, what I'm looking for is either the other vendors say, I like this solution and I want to use it, or I see merit in using it, or I don't like the solution and I have my own. Again, which is perfectly fine, but that's the point I'm looking to get to, because that will give us a good indication of, is it still very distributed, or are we getting to the point where it's actually coming together as a solution, or are we at OPI coming together as a solution?
So what do you mean by distributed in that discussion?
I mean that if
understand-
Intel uses IPDK and we use DPF and Marvell has their own thing, then everybody does things differently, and we're where we are today. If Marvell and whomever says, yes, I like this very much, I want to use it as well, or I'm going to use something very similar, then we have a way forward as a group, because then we sort of, as I said, we can build this process of what happens when you first set up your DPU, and how do you build services on top, and how do you get ISVs on top. And without it, it's still pretty sporadic, pretty distributed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Understood. All right. Any other discussion on this point?
None from me.
All right. Thank you. All right. So, oh, that's not the one. Where's the silly? Where's the?
So on that last point, is it really that black and white? You know, if we say, well, you know, NVIDIA is the only vendor that really is going to fully support DPF and its mechanics, is it then of no interest to OPI? And I would argue that at least from an ISV viewpoint and a consumer viewpoint, that's not true. We're still very interested in what would the ecosystem built around DPF look like as a community.
Oh, and I agree there. And again, all it means to me is that NVIDIA is on its own in developing it. That's what it means to me. That of course we'll continue to contribute to OPI, but it's on NVIDIA to do the work. And to be honest with you, we're probably going to do the work anyways. But it's different if I know that other vendors are also interested, and I need to keep them in mind, and I need to update them about what's going on, and we're using OPI to do that. That's different than, again, like Intel goes and does whatever they want in IPDK and updates when they do something, which has been the case so far. And again, the same could happen with DPF if nobody else is interested in adopting it.
Yeah.
We'll still update, we'll still say what we're doing. It's just that it won't be with OPI first, but rather as an afterthought.
Yeah, and I guess what I keep asking for, and again, I can put a pin in this and not push it too hard, but what I keep asking for is what does adopt it look like from a technical point of view? In other words, what set of code would go into OPI to allow full DPF usage? And if it's, oh, well, you don't need any code, you just need to be told to go to use DPF, well, that's an answer. But I haven't heard that yet. I've heard a middle ground answer, which is there's some stuff that would go in OPI, and the things that are already in OPI could get incorporated. But so far, it's been an exercise for the listener slash reviewer to understand what that is. And certainly to bring DPF forward, there's an idea more than, hey, come look at DPF and tell me if you like it and want to use it. That's a different thing than here's how you incorporate into your OPI. And maybe I was asking poorly a lot before, uh, and this is a better framing of it. Do you understand why I'm asking what I'm asking? And again, I'm not trying to put a whole bunch of work on you, except you're asking everyone to independently try to go figure that out on themselves when they are not already DPF experts. They're just going to have to read based on what's available. And again, it's not a tiny thing.
Well, Joe, I would argue it's not that complicated either, because as I said, we gave access to this about a month ago, a little bit more than a month ago. And since then, we've had a flow of people that have said, I've tried it and I've done this. I've tried it and I built that. So it's not that complicated. If tiny companies that have 3, 4 people have come back to us and said, I've got it up and running, then it's not that complicated. I'm not even asking for people to do that. I'm just saying, spend a few hours, look at the code, look at everything that's been released. There's a GitHub, there's a manual, there's a guide how to deploy it. All the information is there. I'm just trying to assess interest.
Well,
Now,
okay, so let's suppose that everyone is absolutely interested. This is great. So what do we do? Not
then
what do we
we
do to use
define an
it?
OPI. Then we define an OPI. How does the process look like? What does the process look like? Meaning, how do we add other vendors and how do we add ISVs? And we build that process out.
So I guess the question is, do we use it and reference it like we do, say, SZTP or OTel in current repos, where we say we pull that code into what we're doing and manipulate it in OPI, or do we put PRs? So let's say that, I don't know, Marvell needs 30 lines of code added to it to make it work for their card. Do they add that at the DPF repo, or do we somehow bring that into OPI and that 30 lines of code is a pull request against OPI repos? Is that what you're
Well,
asking, Joe? Which of those two?
Yeah. That's right. I mean, that's certainly one good way to frame it.
I think it's the latter. Again, DPF is not a community. It's not a community, and it's not a tool for a community. Meaning, it's not going to be maintained as a community. It's tools that NVIDIA brought out that OPI can take advantage of. So it's more of the latter, Joe, I would argue, because it's a somewhere to start, which we've been missing badly at OPI, I would say.
Yep.
It's a good place to start. Now, again, I'm sure that there'll be changes. I'm sure that there'll be code from other vendors that they'll add, and maybe code that OPI will change around, and that's perfectly fine. But at least we'll have the fundamentals of what it looks like and the fundamentals of the structure. It will be much easier to start from that, I think.
Got it.
All right.
Thanks for those comments a lot.
Yeah,
That
good,
helps quite a bit.
good discussion. I think that adds some clarity a lot. So thank you. All right. So in terms of answering the strategy exploration around ease of use, I thought that uh, this set of slides captured it fairly well, what the elements are. And again, this is along the lines of what we've been doing, what we've been doing as expected. I mean, we've only got, 10 minutes left here. So we probably can't do the next level of work down. But what was what was kind of the in, when you guys did this last week, what was kind of the next steps, the thoughts on how to proceed with this one? I mean, there's this slide here called other things.
Yeah, I think in my mind, at least, Joe, when I wrote that other thing slide, right, was to try to propose how we do proceed, right? In other words, we identify which of these things are in fact the things we want to go work on, and then we set up meetings, or we assign TSC meetings, or we assign TSC members to go sort of flesh out the path forward in each topic area. I don't know. I'm sort of just stringing things together here, but the
Yeah.
idea is to start to do something, right? And to have a plan that we're executing to. And to spread it out a bit, right? My last comment there was assigning different TSC members to different areas that maybe are appropriate for their member company, or that they have an interest in, or that they could, bring an engineering resource to involve with them to sort of lead the effort briefly. And I don't know that we want to go to this level of formal working groups, but at least, have a meeting with members of interest to try to flesh out that topic, see what work has been done in OPI so far, and figure out how do we make progress in the near term future. But I felt, mixed in with that was this DPF, right? And DPF does overlap with a lot of these areas. And so there's this big question about, well, part of this is seeing how much of this has been solved by what we have in OPI already and what we have with DPF, and how do we bring that together and then create a coherent path forward. But it's also trying here in these slides to define the scope of what we want to achieve. So we're not trying to do too much, and we're doing so little that nobody cares, right? I don't think as a group we really came to a consensus last week, Joe, as to exactly what we wanted to do. I think it was more of a let's go off and chew on this. Let's hear from Alad and NVIDIA next week on DPF. And then we'll have another discussion to follow that, probably in our next meeting next week.
Great. All right, let's do that. So let's go off and look at DPF and do the interest assessment that Alad is requesting, and come back with an informed opinion, set of thoughts on DPF. And we can then do the next level of potential integration discussion off of that.
And I would encourage people to go look at the back slides on this deck. These are slides from last year. Actually have some of the details about what OPI has done or was doing in these areas. So they do provide the pre-DPF context of where we were at.
Yeah, and this deck is linked in the TSC channel, I believe, correct?
Yeah, it's Google Docs, it's shared, and it's linked in
Yeah,
Slack.
it's linked for easy opening, easy access.
Yep.
So great, that's great as well.
As far as I know, everyone's been able to access it. I haven't heard of anybody saying they don't have share privileges.
I was about ready to confess I got a rookie problem, which is finding it, but I'll hit you up offline.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, so can you, if you click on the link that, oh, we don't have the link in the TSC, do we? Okay.
I think it is. I think I posted it to TSC, and then I sent it privately to Joe and to Sridhar.
Oh, that's the links presented in 213. Yeah. Everybody go click on that link right now and make sure they can open this sucker.
Got it.
So, Miles?
I got on 213.
Yeah, click on that thing, the last link in the TSC channel.
On Slack, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so the TSC Slack channel.
I got a Slack problem. It's on my end, so
Oh, okay. All right.
I'll go look for it.
Okay,
Don't
hold
want
on.
to waste anyone's
No,
time here.
we're gonna We're gonna set you up. Where's my? Oh, it's in the chat.
I
I was-
just threw it in the chat.
Yeah. Paul beat me to it. I was in the process of doing that. So click on the thing in the chat, and if that opens for you, then we're good to go. And we're done for today. We just want to make sure that everyone has access to this debt directly.
I'm sorry, I can't access it. Do I reach out to Tim to resolve that?
It gives you an permissions error.
Yes, I did request access the other day, but I can do it again right now.
Paul should be able to resolve those, correct, Paul?
Yeah.
Or Sridhar.
I should be able to.
Yeah, there's like a list of people that we share with Google Docs for OPI. And maybe Simon's not on that list because it's from the early days. So,
So we need Simon and Miles to be on that list.
yes.
So Sridhar and Paul, could you guys resolve that? Make sure that everyone who's currently on the OPI TSC has access to all the documents.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, we'll make sure everyone
Thanks,
gets
Aaron.
access. If not, use the mailing list to say, hey, I still don't have access. And Sridhar can figure out how to get it addressed. All right. All right. Well,
Thank you.
thank you, everyone.
Miles, would it be your Intel email address? Or do you have to access Google Docs via like a Gmail or something?
It looks like I got access it via Gmail, and that's just because Intel doesn't seem to have
Yeah, yeah.
internal Slack that
We
they're
have
paying
that same
for.
issue,
So
Miles. So.
Can you drop that appropriate email in the chat here real quick and I'll add you?
yeah, no problem.
And again, I'm not sharing anymore, so the chat won't be saved. All right. All right. I will talk to you guys next week.
All right.
Hang on a sec, Joe, so that
Yeah.
At least it didn't.
That's your
filter.
Intel address.
That's just a Gmail I set up to be different than my personal one. So
And you got Simon's too, right, Paul? He put it in the chat as well.
Yes, I already had Simon's in there. So you've got at intel.com on that email address. Should I make it at gmail.com?
oh, whoops.
That's why I was wondering.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Yeah, Miles Pinner Intel at gmail.com.
At Gmail.
Yeah.
Got it.
I'm sure the Intel autocorrect software did that to you, Miles.
Possibly. No, it's yeah.
And Simon, I'll get yours as well.
Thanks, Paul. I got the folder shared with you email.
Simon, it should be shared with you as well. Yeah.
Thank you. I see it now. Thanks a lot.
Perfect. So yeah, everything in that folder you should now have access to, and somewhere in there, I'm not sure exactly where, but that's where that doc is that Tim made.
Well, we use
Perfect.
it, Paul. It's a mystery where it really is.
Yeah, somewhere in the cloud.
Okay, everyone have a great Thursday.
It's under the TSC presentations
There you go.
folder.
All right.
That was a really appropriate place for it. Way to go, Tim.
Thank you. I think we're done, aren't we?
Yep. Bye-bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
All right. Talk to you later, all.
Bye bye.